Next up we have Phil Lester. He's a Professor of Entomology from Victoria University. I'm giving him a little bit more time to get up onto stage because he's done his foot in and he's needing a little bit of sympathy. So he tried to get an extra 10 minutes out of me, but I've docked him 10, so he's going to have to be fast now. Phil's going to be talking to us about ants and deformed wing virus, so please.
Thanks, Michelle. This is going. Excellent. Is that enough? Can people hear me? People can hear me? Great, thank you. Is my first slide up, or is that my responsibility? There we go. All right, so my name's Phil Lester. I'm from Victoria University of Wellington. I'm going to talk about something a little bit different right now. I'm going to talk about some ants, but also some bees, and some virus work as well. Firstly, I have to acknowledge the co-authors that are here. So we've got James Beattie, Monica Gruber, Jess and Marion who are here today. And Jess has a poster, and we would love to talk to beekeepers who have a problem with Argentine ants after the meeting, right? So as I will show you, and as you can see here, Argentine ants can be and are a major problem for beekeepers, especially more north you go. In Gisborne, we've heard of bees attacking ants. In Auckland and especially in Northland, where I'm going to talk about lots of the work today. This talk is going to be a game of a talk of two halves, hopefully, if I can work this. I don't know if I can work this. How do I change slide? Is that button going to do it? Oh, yep, that button's going to do it. So this is my attempt to relate myself to an All Black captain. It's going to fail miserably because the first half of the talk, it's a talk of two halves, is going to be some nerdy, geeky science, talking about things that really interest me, viral dynamics, viral discovery, viral populations in bees and in ant populations. We're going to talk a little bit about the effects of Argentine ants on bee hive survival. Right? So they have a major effect in these populations. And then I'm going to move on in the next half of the talk to something a bit more practical. We're going to talk a little bit about carrying on what Barry and his team talked before about too in terms of hive site selection. So ants, especially as you go north of here, are going to be a major issue in terms of your hive site selection. And I suspect the problem that I'm going to talk about today is only going to get worse for a lot of beekeepers. And we'll talk about hive site selection, prevention's better than cure, and chemical control tools, which are actually pretty minimal at the moment. These are Argentine ants. All right, so these ants are over here. So here's a queen. So that's a queen Argentine ant. There are some workers. They're a bit smaller. Small, brown, boring ants, really. But they are known for their aggressive nature. So here's one standing on another ant's head, aggressively attacking it. They were first observed in New Zealand in 1990, right, so quite some time ago, 25 years ago, 26 years ago. Plague of noxious foreign ants noted for their stupidity. That's an interesting statement. Have unwisely chosen Mount Smart Stadium as their home. They've moved on a lot since then. They're established as far down as Christchurch and all the way north from Christchurch and are coming to a home, unfortunately, near you sometime soon. We've worked on Argentine ants for quite some time, and some of the interesting things that we've found out on our time here is periodically, like honeybees in North America especially, populations periodically collapse. And that was a bit strange to us at the time. What the heck is going on? Why would these populations of Argentine ants collapse? And so we looked for viruses, and we've done some viral discovery work with these Argentine ant populations. And what we've found along the way is that they are very much the host to a range of honeybee viruses, as well as carrying their own particular novel set of viruses. So in terms of the honeybee virus, most of you will be familiar with things like Kashmir bee virus. Kashmir bee virus, a really common virus, for the most part pretty innocuous. It doesn't really do a whole lot for your honeybee hives. This is the entire viral genome up the top here. It's about 9,000 base pairs. If we go along and map the virus that we find in Argentine ants, to that we get pretty good coverage. So this is almost definitely Kashmir bee virus within honeybee hives. That's a bit sciencey, that note. What we initially found was some work some sequences that looked like Israeli acute paralysis virus, which is another pretty serious virus that we don't have in New Zealand. And we look at those, again, the entire genome going across the top here. We can see mapping to parts of that genome with our viruses. So this work suggests, hey, we've got some viruses that are unknown in here. This is not Israeli acute paralysis virus, which is spectacular because that has major export ramifications if that virus was to be in the country. That's a bit of nerdy, geeky science. What we have found is that these Argentine ants carry a range of viruses. They carry black queen cell virus. Lots of you might be familiar with that. It's got an unimaginative name because honeybees infected by this virus develop black queen cells like this and pretty dead queens. They also carry things like deformed wing virus. So we've got deformed wing virus in these bees and ants as well as bees. The take-home message from that bit is clearly what we've got going on here is Argentine ants carry a range of honeybee viruses, right? So they are a problem and they vector honeybee viruses as well as attacking hives themselves. We found this result, we were really interested in it, and we thought, how do we look at ant-bee interactions and viral interactions? And what we'd heard of is places in Northland where there are a lot of Argentine ants attacking honeybees. And here's where it gets more relevant for you guys. Because when we went up to Northland to have a look around, then we find that there are beehives, that are a lot of beehives at a lot of sites around Northland that are under serious attack from Argentine ants. This slide is a little hard to see, but you can probably just about see some sort of black fuzz going all over this, little dots going all over this hive. These are Argentine ants attacking this hive, right? So there is thousands, hundreds of thousands of Argentine ants that are attacking this hive at the time, right? So they're getting inside here. What are they doing? For a lot of the time, these ants appear to be ignoring the honey, really, and going straight for the brood. So they're going in and attacking the brood, killing the brood within those hives. Sometimes they'll raid the honey, and we hear varying reports. Sometimes they'll ignore the brood and go after the honey, but commonly they're attacking the brood, the larvae and pupa within there, and killing them. All right? So you can look at slides. So here's that slide that I opened with. Jess took this picture. And you can see here's lots of Argentine ants. And these ones are in this honeycomb at the moment. The bees that are around them, Michelle has told me I'm not allowed to use the word stressed. The bees around them are clearly agitated by these ants, right? So they really don't seem to like it. They're not smiling bees. They're unhappy bees about having these ants in amongst them. So the critical thing I think that's happening a lot for these beehives is that the ants are having a direct mortality effect. So you're having direct mortality when you're getting ants raiding your beehives. It's having a direct mortality. They're killing off the pupae within them. But certainly, if we start looking at the viral dynamics going on here, we're seeing interesting things going on here too. So here's a graph. Here's a beehive for a start, and you can see lots of these little dots, right, on the super, all little dots going all over this. This is a seriously affected beehive, right? So there's an awful lot of Argentine ants getting in there and attacking that. But if you look at this graph over the side, we've got on the x-axis here, we've got the month, so from February through to May, these samples have just been taken. And on this axis, we've got relative deformed wing virus infection. This is relative to a housekeeping gene expression. And you've got little virus down the bottom and lots of virus. If you look at in red there, the points where you've got bees with Argentine ants, they've got a lot more virus in them than what we do when we have bees with no ants, these down the bottom here, right? So the virus load of bees when there are Argentine ants around is considerably higher in these populations, right? It's a really big problem. And what we can do is do things like correlate the relative deformed wing virus in ants with that in honeybees. And you can see, hey, if you've got ants around with lots of deformed wing virus in them, then you've got bees with lots of deformed wing virus in them. Actually, I think this graph probably should be switched around. I don't think, actually, but I've yet to have evidence, that the ants are driving the abundance of this virus in the bees. I think it's the other way around. The bees are driving this abundance in the ants. But it's clearly a problem, right? So where you've got lots of ants, you've got lots of virus, is the take-home message from this story. And there's really interesting viral dynamics going on here that we're yet to really get a handle on. Such as if you have lots of deformed wing virus in ants, then you have this virus that we've discovered in ants. We have a negative relationship going on here. We just don't know what's happening here yet, but there's clearly interesting things going on. The critical bit in terms of the study that we've just done is not so much in the virus loads, but looking at the survival of honeybee hives that have Argentine ants. All right, so here we've got a graph. We've got down the bottom here days since first observation of the hives. So we started observing hives in February. We've just finished in June. And we've got the hive survival. Either it's alive or it's dead. What we see is sites without ants, the hive survival is about 90%. Right? So we've looked at a bunch of apiaries. And in those apiaries, if you don't have ants from the period of February through to June, then you have quite high survival of those hives, about 90%. But if you have Argentine ants raiding your hives, then you have about 50% hive mortality, right? So this is 3 apiaries in Northland populations, and after 5-6 months, what we're seeing is 50% on average mortality of your hives. There's a bit of variation between different apiaries. Some apiaries we've seen have had up to 80% mortality due to these ants. I think it's not really a virus thing. I think it's primarily an issue associated with these ants raiding directly and killing off the brood and eating the larvae rather than viral loads. The conclusion here is that in New Zealand, in warmer parts, especially in Gisborne, we've heard of this, in Auckland and further north in Northland, Argentine ants can be a major problem. They can knock out 50% of your hives, which just adds to the list of things that can do nasty things to your hives, I guess. So that's what I'm going to finish on in my last 8 minutes, because Michelle wouldn't give me any more time, even though I've got a sore leg. We've got prevention is much easier than cure. I'm going to talk more in an applied situation, and I'm going to talk about where you put your hives and trying to limit the effects of these Argentine ants. I have to say that prevention is much easier than cure, right? So these ants can be a big problem. They can kill off 50% of your hives. You want to be very careful about where you put your honeybee sites, right? And it carries on with the talk that Barry's just talked a little bit about, right? Don't put your hives near where there are Argentine ants, all right? If you do that, especially if you're in Gisborne, Auckland, and Northland, then it's likely that you will suffer the consequence. 50% mortality over 6 months, that's pretty serious in terms of that. These Argentine ants spread on their own by only tens or hundreds of meters a year. So their biology is not one where they're moved around by themselves long distances. They are much more commonly moved around by humans. So if you think, here's a nice campground, that's a good apiary site. Probably not, because if you're in warmer climates, campgrounds are likely to be the depository of rubbish and campers and things like that, which will typically often move Argentine ants around. So if I had to choose an apiary, I would typically keep clear of campground type environments. Argentine ants do move around an awful lot by people in pot plants and all that sort of stuff, so human habitation, commonly Argentine ants are moved around there. Then if you are in a situation where you have hives that are infested by Argentine ants, don't move those to a different site. This is a picture that comes across a bit dark. This is a hive box, and right down the bottom here, there's a whole lot of ants, and there's larvae and pupal ants in here. Right, so Argentine ants are clearly nesting within your hive boxes. Right, so if you decide, if this site's got ants, I'll pick up and move these, then you're moving your problem with you. It is very much the case that at times what you'll see are queens in these boxes, queens out foraging, those sorts of things. If you have a site which has got lots of Argentine ants in it, then my advice is just to let it die a slow death and not restock it with other Argentine ants. I think a lot of the established beekeepers are actually already onto that. It's a lot of the newbies that are moving hives into these sorts of sites, Argentine ant infested sites, or don't know the experience of these. If you fail with your prevention, good luck with the cure, unfortunately. All right. There are a bunch of different bait products available, a bunch of different ways to kill off Argentine ants, but I haven't heard of huge amounts of success so far, right, with lots of these. The critical bit, if you are trying to kill off Argentine ants, is to kill individuals like this one. This is a queen, right, so that's a queen Argentine ant. You've got to kill her. Typically there are many queens per nest. Often those queens are well hidden underground, away from any contact with direct pesticide. If you've got to kill the queens, then you often will need to utilize a baiting system which is slow acting, that the individuals can take back to the nest and deposit underground. This is one of those, all right? So this is Extinguish, which I've known some beekeepers to utilize that we've talked about. You apply it sort of like this kind of fashion, and it's had stories of variable success. The apiary that we worked in Northland this last season had many applications of Extinguish and still had lots of bee mortality as a consequence. There are other products available and out there. If you look at the Landcare research website, there is Argentine ants in New Zealand. They've got a list of control tools out there, and you can go to that site and look for chemical controls. I would say at the moment, though, that there's nothing that I can personally recommend that will control these ants if you have them. So I personally can't recommend at this stage any specific treatment or control for Argentine ants that's likely to work. We certainly need more work on different treatments. It's been my experience that I'll put some bait out carefully on a tree or whatever, and the Argentine ants will just walk past that, so we don't quite know what's going on here. They seem to focus on honey some of the time, but often it's with brood that they're attacking. So we just don't know. In the little bit of time that I will have left after this, probably the audience, many people in the audience would appreciate to hear any success stories that others have had for control of Argentine ants where they are a problem. If you do have Argentine ant problems, what I would love you to do is talk to me, Marion, or Jess. We'll be around. Jess has a poster, and we would love to talk to you about those sorts of any sort of issues that you have. Yeah, thank you. And I'd just like to thank Barry and the Poverty Bay's East Coast Hub, or however they're known now, for sponsoring Jess to this conference. That's fantastic. Thank you. Jesus, I'm loud. If anybody wants a question. Yeah.
Monitor for varroa mites and those hives, because my experience in Canada, the ants will move into weak colonies, weakened by varroa, and later on just they try to finish up the hive because bees are not there to defend themselves.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So we are yet to put a finger on what makes a hive susceptible. There can be seemingly healthy, vigorous hives that are here, that are being attacked, and the hive next to them that's not so healthy or whatever, doesn't seem to be attacked. We don't have a handle on yet what makes that particular hive susceptible and which doesn't. It could be Varroa issues, it could be they're weakened by something. We just don't know at this stage. Yep, yeah.
Yeah, hi Phil, James Harrison. I was part of your study.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, we've got about 4 or 5 yards that are sort of quarantined because of the ants. And yeah, have had not a hell of a lot of success in getting rid of them entirely, but there are times of the year when the numbers seem to drop down on the ants, which you can kind of... one thing I did want to say was we pollinate quite a bit of kiwi fruit and avocados and that sort of thing, and ethically I wouldn't use those hives, I'd quarantine those areas, but I'm sure if the ants get into the kiwi fruit orchards and things like that, they could cause some real problems.
Yeah.
Getting that fruit exported and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I should have thanked the beekeepers involved with this, including James. Thank you very much for being part of the study. That's fantastic. And Bruce, if Bruce is here as well. I think you're right. There are areas where there are lots of kiwi fruit that are already heavily infested with Argentine ants as it is. So you're right in terms of you don't want to move, when you're moving your hives into kiwi fruit, you don't want to necessarily get moving Argentine ants, but I would be very careful about when you do move your hives into kiwi fruit that you're not picking up a problem from the kiwi fruit orchard yourself while you're there. So it's going to be working both ways and exchanges both ways, unfortunately. Yeah. My time is up, and Mean Michelle said I wasn't allowed it. Oh, I've got some more minutes. I have more minutes. Any other questions? Yep.
Yeah, you gone down the lines of working with like Vespex and along the lines of their bait stations with their protein-based bait?
I can repeat the question. So the question was, have we gone down the lines of working with the Vespex? So Vespex is a new bait that's been developed and really successful for wasp control this year. Those of you that have wasp problems, I would strongly suggest that you investigate Vespex. The bait stations, the extinguish and that sort of thing is similar to the Vespex, but we haven't yet investigated Vespex on Argentine ants. So there are some bait stations out there. It's possible that matrix of Vespex, it's primarily a protein-based matrix that's attractive to things that eat protein, which are not bees. It could be really useful in this situation. We haven't done that work yet, so that's another avenue that could be investigated. But certainly, investigating something that's very specific to Argentine ants would be useful as well.
Right, yeah, I used to do pest control, and the Argentine ants, they'll go protein, they'll go sugar.
Yep.
If you go back to the products of pest control that you've got there.
Yep. That one?
Okay, the one, the bottom bottle there, it's a sugar-based one. So if you're gonna have to use that, they have a little what they call a ant cafe. Bloody things are bloody expensive, but that'll keep it away from the bees at least when the ants will eat the sugar.
Yeah. Yep.
I wouldn't put it out in a cap or something like that because it'll kill your bees as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
So just a quick one, if you're investigating new sites, are there any reliable diagnostic tools we can use to establish whether Argentine ants are present in those sites before we move bees to them?
Yes, so it's one of those situations where you have to know your ants a little bit. So typically the Argentine ants, if you go to an area and you see a little river of ants, a little river of brown ants, then that's the best way of looking for Argentine ants. You can put out some baits, you can put out some like cat food or some honey and that sort of thing, and leave them for a while to see if Argentine ants come along. But these are really distinctive ants in terms of they walk around in little rivers of Argentine ants that go everywhere, along fences or wherever they can. So you've just got to look around. There's no other way of diagnosing that an area has Argentine ants other than, hey, there's a river of ants moving around this area, and that's the best. They are, as I say, commonly associated with human habitation, with campgrounds, with those sorts of things. So if you're going well away from human habitation, often you won't see Argentine ants. So the critical bit is I would say, look, just don't go near areas of urban development for your Argentine ants if you're really worried about them. Stay well clear. Try and go off the beaten track. Very good. I shall go away. Hobble off. Thank you.